Welcome to the Bible Made Clear. This is part two in an interview with Herb Butterworth, and we've been talking about the Bible, trying to clear up misconceptions and discuss some evidences. And in the last or the first video segment, we ran over an hour, so we wanted to continue this time, but we'll jump back in. And by the way, if you like the channel, please hit subscribe. I know that helps the channel. So, well, Herb, we'll let you continue on basically from where you feel you left off the last time.
Well, where were we? We were just talking about the Bible and how valuable it is to everybody in their lives, and how much better off we would all be if we lived by what the Bible taught us. And
we kind of jumped off the beginning with why we're here, or how we're here and why we're here, right? How they connect together, and then you had started to take off on that. You did mention some stuff about. I know you read all those atheists, and I don't know how you don't bang your head against the wall afterwards, but you're a good resource for, hey, what did this guy say? That's an atheist. So,
it can't. I bang my head against the wall now more than I did back then. Now, I'm not saying that I accepted what they said back then, but I felt more challenged about it, I would say. But now, knowing what I know and looking into it more, I can't believe some of the things they say. I guess, we start out, why don't we just say, is God a necessity? And if so, why would he desire to commune with us? I guess that would be the beginning.
So is God, I guess, the question to you is God a necessity?
I have come to the conclusion, and I'm not, for me personally, it's not up for debate. Of course, he's a necessity. We talked in the last video a little bit about origins and why is there something rather than nothing. We can go back as far as we can go to the Big Bang, and we can call that the origin. And some atheists will tell you we go back to the Big Bang to ask any question about anything before that is irrelevant because there was nothing before that. Stop right there. We're done. There was a Big Bang and everything came from that. All time, space, and matter came from that. And we don't even want to think before that because there was nothing before that. What nonsense. What absolute nonsense.
Maybe they don't want to think before that because it's the implications.
They don't want to think beyond that. And they're very creative about these kinds of things. And of course, there has to be something before that because something had to go bang. What was that? You can't avoid this. You can speak with these people, and I've tried to speak with these people, and it's very difficult. They're quite creative in some of the things that they say, and you just keep going in circles and circles and circles. But the fact of the matter is that for there to have been a Big Bang, and we'll go with that, grant them that there was a Big Bang, but what caused the Big Bang? Something had a bang. What was that cause? You can't avoid the fact that something had to exist outside of time, space, and matter if it created time, space, and matter. That something had to have been bigger than anything that we can comprehend. It had to be intelligent, because I think it's irrational and irresponsible to say that something intelligent came from the non-intelligent. I think for things to have developed the way that they did in such a way to eventually create life in this universe, and to say that there was no intelligence behind that is nonsense and irresponsible. And you can say whatever you want to say about it. It just doesn't make sense. We can even grant them that and say that, okay, something went bang and everything just came into existence all at one time. But how did we get the things that we have now, and how is everything so finely tuned, and how did everything come together to create intelligent life that we see on this planet right now? There's such a thing called specified complexity. Now we can see a lump of clay that formed over time in a river or something like that, and it just keeps coming down the river, and more silt and dirt and debris form, and okay, that developed, but it doesn't have any design to it. It's just a bunch of mud that just kind of collected in a pool. Okay, we can see how that came together, but there's nothing specified about it. It doesn't have any purpose to it. It's not doing anything. It's got no design. I get that. That would be the key word. There's a design. It lacks design. But when we see a human body or even a single cell, we see incredible design in that. Don't tell me that there's no mind behind it. That's absolutely foolish. As we talked about often, Scott, we look at a cell and we look inside of that tiny little cell, and we see all these different molecules in there, like a DNA molecule, and that in itself is so complex, outrageously complex, that the human mind cannot understand that, couldn't even come close to designing something like that. We're talking about an intelligent human mind trying to develop something like that. We cannot do it. And they are trying to argue that this came together by sheer chance with no intelligence behind it.
Randomness without any intelligence.
Okay. Yeah. Evolution did it. Yeah.
The marvel of evolution.
Yes. All you need is millions of years, and there you go. It's going to happen. Well, that's nonsense. Okay, we can go through all that stuff and go on and on about it and all the fine tuning and all of that. But yeah, I think the ultimate conclusion is that yes, God is necessary. We cannot have a universe or life without his intelligence behind it. Now, it would stand to reason to me that if we have this intelligent God and he created all of these things, that there would be some communication with his creation. I'm not going to get on board with Einstein and just be a deist and say he created these things, he made everything the way it is, and then just moved on. And he doesn't care about us anymore. He just let it go.
Well, think about it, just to interject. If that was the case, he'd have to know more about God in order to come to those conclusions. And if he knows that much about God, it means that God had to communicate with him. In other words, that's a logical contradiction to even come out and say something. That would be like me not knowing you and say, well, the reason that I don't communicate with Herb is because Herb can't communicate. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I'd have to know enough about you to know that, which means then I know you.
Yeah. Well,
I don't want to confuse
you opened up another door that we could easily go into, and if we have time, we certainly will. But, some atheistic thought processes that go on. But we'll close that door for now and move on. But the point is that we have to have God. We cannot avoid him. You try as you may, try as you want. We cannot avoid the necessity for a God. And I remember hearing one time somebody saying, there cannot be a God because before the Big Bang, there was no time, there was no space, and there was no matter. And there being no time, there was no time for him to exist in. And they said this like this was a slam dunk. It's over. End the argument. Turn the lights out. Everybody go home. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Come on. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. There has to be a God. There has to be a creator behind all of this. And yeah, I think that if there's a God, he communicates with us.
How would we know his communication?
Well, I was just going to get into that. So we have what we know is the Holy Bible, and we can look at that. But there's other out there too. There's the Muslims that say Allah. There's the Buddhists. There's all these. I could go on and on about all the different religions out there and the different ways that they communicate or don't communicate. And I would say we'll take a look at those and say which one really makes the most sense. And I think that to say that we are all God, that each of us as individuals and all life and all things are God, I would say, okay, can you give me some evidence of that? How do you claim that, or is that just a thought in your mind that you're professing to people and hoping that they accept it as well? Well, it's kind of appealing. I mean, if we go along with that, we can pretty much do whatever we want to do. We're all God, and we set our own standards, and uh, we can just do whatever we want.
Yeah,
It's great.
I always thought if somebody had to tell you that you're God, you're probably not.
Well, that's probably a good indication that if you were God, you'd probably know it, and you didn't need somebody else to come along and tell you that. So, can we safely rule that one out?
Yeah.
Can we just say that we're not all God and we're not all destined to become gods? Can we rule that out as well? We're not all destined to become gods.
There's a lot of people
And
in mental institutions that think they're God too.
right, yeah, and there would probably be those that would argue, well, maybe they have it right, and we think that they're deranged, but actually they're the ones that have it right, and we're deranged.
Yeah.
There'd probably be those. But anyway, I think that if we look at the Bible, it's practical, and it identifies us and our nature for who we are. It explains where we came from in a rational manner, albeit miraculous. We'll say that it's not something our coming into being and the creation process is not something that we see every day. But obviously, creation, no matter what it was not something that we see every day. We don't see big bangs every day. We don't see planets being formed every day, and so certainly it was a miraculous thing. But I think that the Bible is the only thing that gives us an explanation from beginning to end of our creation and why we're here and who put us here and how he feels about us and his desire for fellowship with us. And that's why he created us. And his bestowing free will upon us to come to him freely in love or to freely reject him, which he doesn't want for us, but he gave us the ability to do that, because if he didn't give us the ability to do that, is that really love? Is that something that he would force us into? No, it doesn't make sense, and that's not what the Bible tells us, despite what some people might say. That's just not the case.
Though we had mentioned in the first video that something was up with Betsy when she chose you.
Well, yeah,
exceptions to the rule.
People can be delirious now and then,
Yeah.
A momentary lapse of judgment, as you might call it. And,
yeah.
And some of us benefit from
Rhonda
that.
had the same, I think, with me.
yeah. But yeah, I think as we talked about a little bit in the last video, was that the Bible is the only thing that really makes sense. And I'll reiterate once again, this all comes together. This is where it all hinges. If Jesus Christ was who he claimed to be, there's no question about this. Everything just comes together. So the key is, was he? And can we prove that he was who he claims to be? And I think if we look back historically, if we just look at it historically, the documentation that we have and eyewitness accounts, how close to the actual time do these documentations take place? Is this something that was manufactured 2,000 years after the supposed crucifixion and resurrection? No, we have documentation that goes back, what is it, within 40 years, I believe. And more than that, we have the eyewitness accounts that were documented within the lifetimes. I think we can get within 2 years of the actual crucifixion and resurrection time. Now, that's quite a thing, because there were plenty of people to deny that this had happened. And we just don't have that. And we have some things that happen. This is a large group of people that were all in agreement as to what happened. And I don't think it's too difficult to say that, yes, historically, this is what happened at that time, and it was overwhelming. There were a lot of people that were very deeply affected by that, and we can look at Paul as just one example. He didn't see the risen Christ at the time, but he saw him sometime after that, and he was profoundly changed within just a moment. And I think that's quite a testimony.
Well,
And
before you move on, I just want to mention something about you're mentioning the manuscripts. I don't know if it's the Chesterbeatty Papyri or whatever that's one of the closest ones in the first century, but
mhm.
I think what people often get confused with is because there's like 5,800 Greek manuscripts, right? They span really all the way from the 1st to the 10th century. And you also, after the 1st century, you begin to have I think it's around the 3rd century, they start translating into Latin, might have been earlier with Syrian, Coptic, Nubian, and these other languages, which means you're basically taking manuscripts, the originals from an area, and really spreading them out, not in just like Judea, but Asia Minor, over into Europe, North Africa, because that's where they end up collecting them all, because they just kept making copies and sending them out to other churches because they knew that these writings were from the apostles, right? Or validated by the apostles. Nothing after the 1st century, obviously, because John died near the end of the 1st century, and he was the only one to validate. But so now you have all these manuscripts sent out, and there's a lot of errors in them from copying. Nothing that you would not know what's actually being said. We've gone over that in detail. But the fact that it was distributed so widely, so early, and then copied into other languages, I mean, you're really up around 25,000 copies, probably by the 4th or 5th century, and with these other languages added in, and you can't change it. It's not like this isn't a Microsoft Word document that you can go back in, change it, and then it changes it every place else. Or anything like that. I mean, these are written on scrolls and animal vellums and other things. This is a one-shot deal. You write it and you're done. Like, it's not like you're going to erase certain parts of it or change it or make it say something that the church wants it to say, in the later years, like the 5th century or something, because the church came up with, stuff that was kind of crazy or whatever. I mean, there's all these like weird theories, but the facts are that all these manuscripts map back to at least the late 1st century and are validated by the early church fathers of the late 1st and early 2nd century, because they copy a lot of this stuff in their writings. So you have so many copies of all these basically New Testament writings distributed over such a huge geographical area. There's really no opportunity to change it. I mean, if there's misspellings and stuff like that, orthographical errors, they're like a postage stamp. You can kind of figure out where they came from and maybe what group of texts they copied from to distribute them out. But this is a one-shot deal. This wasn't we changed our mind, we're gonna change the New Testament, so let's go like get all the copies and erase them. That's ludicrous. I mean, that you couldn't even do that today, never mind back then. Do you know what I'm saying? So I mean,
I know.
So when you mention the manuscripts, there's just so much that goes behind that to validate that they were not only transferred accurately, the information in them, but then you get into the internals like you were just moving into with Paul. I assume that you were going to talk about some of the internal truths that really validated as being true and not just kind of fabricated stories.
Yeah, and I want to touch on something again. Just like you were talking about some of the documentations and all, and I find it interesting that we talk about, or they talk about biblical errors, and they point out so many errors in the New Testament alone, but most of these are like punctuation, and it's like 98 or 99% of these things are punctuation errors, and they do not change the meaning at all. So the basic message is conveyed in all the documents. Another thing that they point out as errors are things like, one gospel will say that they went to the tomb and there were two angels there, and one of them said, and then another gospel will say there was an angel there that said, and they point that out, and they'll say, one of them said that there was one angel, the other one said that there were two angels, and they point that out as an error, when in fact that's not the case. That one of them said there was an angel there that said. As far as what that's communicating to you, there might have been 10 angels there, but there was an angel there that said. The other one said there were two angels there, and one of them said. That's not an error. But they pointed out, and my point is, if they say that, and they have to dig to find an error like that, certainly if there were blatant errors, they wouldn't be bothering with something like that.
Right.
They manufacture.
Well, and Norm Geisler used to say, we know this, when there's two, there's always one.
Right. Well, that's a good point. But, there's constantly things coming out. They're pointing out errors in the Bible. I remember reading one, and it stuck out in my mind. But there's a lot of them that are just similar. And one of them said, okay, we look at the errors in the Bible, and one of them right away is that the Lord created two lights in the sky. One was for the day, which was the sun, and one was for the night, which was the moon. Aha! The moon isn't a light at all. It merely reflects the light of the sun. Biblical error. Give me a break.
Well, Herb, those are the kind of ridiculous accusations. And again, skeptics and atheists make those accusations against the Bible. They put them out with a lot of vigor and kind of pontification, if you will. And then, people that have never read the Bible, which again is part of what you're trying to address in this interview, people that haven't really read the Bible end up listening to them and then discard the Bible as not worth reading because maybe somebody that they had some respect for or some supposed authority has said, the Bible's nonsense and for this reason, which is really a stupid reason. But the problem with all those, like, remember I did that whole series where I went out to the atheist.org website, and all their criticisms of the Bible, I basically answered them. Like, there's a series on the channel where you can go through and you can run through those videos. I put all their criticisms right up there. I quoted them, and then I gave the Bible answers for them because I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is the stuff that they're saying is a contradiction in the Bible.
Right.
And as you mentioned in the first video that we did, the last one, you talked about, misunderstanding the things under the Mosaic Law. And, they'd go under the Mosaic Law, look at the consequences for a particular sin, and then say, oh, see, the Bible says to stone homosexuals. And it's like, well, wait a minute. No, within the nation of Israel, under the Mosaic Law, within that nation alone, and in that particular economy that they were in, yes, God had a very, very strict requirement. Hey, listen, you got stoned for blaspheming God. But because it was derailing the purpose and the reason for Israel's existence, which God could not afford to allow to happen. But to take that out of its context and then just kind of fast forward it into the 21st century and say, see, and it says to love people in the New Testament. So, the Bible's a contradiction. And I mean, oh my gosh, if that was the case, I could go on to any writing anywhere and then probably within a page or two, including all the atheists and skeptics, pull sentences out where they appear to contradict themselves on a previous page, because that that's not scholarship. That's nonsense. That's stupid, quite frankly.
It is stupid, and some of the things that they point out like that, like stoning homosexuals and all that, and they would say, well, that's not something that we should do. But the fact that you don't do that, you're not living up to the biblical standards that you preach to people. So you're being really contradictory, and you're not. I don't. If you really believe the Bible is true, then you should be doing that. But that's a bunch of nonsense, because they're taking it way out of context. And as you said, that was for the nation of Israel at that time. And there was a good reason for that, setting Israel apart from the rest of the world. Now, for me, I think I see things like that, and that's really confirmation, because if you're going to dig at things like that, petty little things like that, and those are what you need to point out, that the Bible contradicts itself and therefore it's not the Word of God, it's just a book of nonsense. If those are the things that you need to do, I think, wow, this book is pretty solid.
Yeah.
So I'm,
yeah.
that
would be like criticizing your intellectual ability just because you have more hair on the bottom of your head than on the top.
Well,
it's got nothing to do with it.
Grass doesn't grow in a busy street, they say.
Yeah, I'm getting there myself, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's always going to be that. But, like we did in the last video, and we point these things out, and we have a desire for people to please, don't be swayed by that kind of an argument that the Bible doesn't have any relevance in today's world. It's completely relevant, and it's what can change your life.
I would like to talk to the person that says that they disagree with the morality that's in the Bible. Now, I'm not talking about the consequences under the nation of Israel, but I want to meet the person that says, no, I want a thief and a murderer and an adulterer and a liar, somebody that wouldn't obey their parents if, and all this other stuff, to say, well, I want those people all living around me. That's absurd.
Well, we're kind of seeing that now a little bit.
Well, and people don't like it, do they, Herb?
No, they don't like it. Certain businesses going out of business because of things that they promoted.
Isn't that funny?
And yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's there are things in the Bible that people don't like as far as morality and the moral life that they're calling people to live, and they don't like that. They don't like that for themselves, and they don't want to live that way. But aside from that, if they really looked at it, and some of the little things that are going on in the world today that we consider now as perfectly normal and nothing wrong with it, those things are really destroying society. And they're tearing apart family structure. And we're really hurting as a result of it. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. If we did live by a biblical code and listen to what Scripture is teaching us, we would all be so much better off. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like in the family structure, the Bible calls us as men to be the heads of our families, to be the heads of our wives. The men, the husbands, are to be in charge. Now, I think the world looks at that now and they say, oh, the man's in charge. So he's like in his house, he sits in a throne, and he gets whatever he wants and tells people around how to serve him.
Sure, he's a dictator, right?
He's a dictator, and everything is his, and bring it to him and serve him. And you only live that you can go on and continue serving him. What they don't understand, and this is true in general of all people, even in the workplace, it's like this. A true leader and somebody who is called to lead, that is not a wonderful thing for that person, because a true leader is called to a life of sacrifice.
It's more work.
It's more work. And you are to put your wife ahead of yourself. Your life is to be laid down in order for your wives to continue. You are to love her as Christ loved the church. You are to sacrifice all things for her to make sure that she is well cared for in the best possible way that you can provide for her. They don't see it that way.
Well,
They see,
you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I think you're describing servant leadership.
yeah, that's how they're seeing it. Yeah.
And
You,
but I mean,
your house.
we are servants, and we lead by service, and we model by service. But it's interesting. I look at, I know a lot of unsaved guys, and they're actually the ones that live like a dictator. They look at me and they say, "You do that, and you do that, you do that," and it's like, why are you doing all that stuff? Have your wife do that stuff, and it's like, no, I'm serving her. I love her. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't marry her to be a slave,
Right. And also, as men, you are to make the ultimate decision. And not only do you make the ultimate decision, you are the one to answer for it. And it requires a lot of prayer. Like, if you, in the event, you go to a church at a certain church, and we both go there, and for whatever reason, the husband might decide, well, you know what, I don't think this is quite right for us. I don't think it's going well. So he talks to his wife about it and suggests some of the things that might not be right, and maybe we should go somewhere else because of that. Well, you talk to your wife about it, and you get her feelings about it, and you pray about it together, and you come to a decision. But ultimately, it's the husband's decision. Are we going to leave that church and go to another one? It's a big decision, and it's his responsibility. And if you're doing something out of selfish wants or gain, to because you might see more personal opportunity that whatever might be there. If you're doing that and you're taking your wife out of a church where she might be getting something that she's not going to get in another church that you might want to go to, you're going to answer for that, because you are the head of your house. And you need to be sure about what you're doing, and you need to make sure that you're not harming her in any way. You have to, you're taking care of her spiritual life as well. So there's a lot of responsibility about it, and a lot of really internalizing these things and examining these things before you make such a decision. So you don't just make a decision based on what you want. She has a lot of input, but ultimately you are responsible for it, and ultimately you make that decision. It's your decision, and it's not like our modern society would have it. We're a patriarchal society, and the man dictates. And as you pointed out, we're not the lords over the manor, and we have servants running around. And no, I'd like them to understand that the biblical patriarchy is not what they're trying to present it to be. It's something much different, and it's also the way things would work the best. Because in any relationship, two people together in a relationship, if they're going to function as one, somebody has to be the one responsible to make that ultimate decision at the end. You can talk about it all you want, get the other person's feelings, let them have as much input as you can possibly get from them, but ultimately somebody has to make the decision.
Well, and essentially, when God comes knocking, he's knocking on your door. He's gonna say, "Okay, Herb, why'd you do this?" He's not going to say, "Okay, Betsy, why'd you do this?" He's going to say, "Herb, why did you make that decision?" Because you can't have 10 heads.
Right. And then ultimately, what's even more than that, that leadership is a burden. It is a burden. It's not better for you. It makes more work for you. But if you're a husband and a pastor, oh boy, because you got a church under you.
Yeah. Hey, let me tell you, it's easier being the assistant pastor than the senior pastor. Now, a lot of people think it's the opposite, but I get to voice all my complaints, all my opinions, all the things that I want to the senior pastor. But at the end of the day, he's the one that has to make the decisions,
Yeah.
and the like you said, if you're making a decision based on selfish motivation, this is better for me, but not better for a lot of other people or whatever, that
Right.
comes back to bite you very quickly, and the fruit of it starts to rear its ugly head. And
Yeah.
look, there's times that I thought, boy, I could probably influence the senior pastor and other pastors to change certain things that we do, like operationally, that would make my life easier. Now, it would make everybody else's life more difficult, but it would make my life easier.
Yeah.
But then I'm the one that has to get along with God and say, so you want to inconvenience all those other people just so that you can have a little bit more ease?
Yeah.
You can't do that. I mean,
No, you can't do that.
it's the irresponsible thing to do. That's the point.
Right. So you have to answer for that because you're in a position of leadership at the church, even though you have a senior pastor. You influenced him to do that. And now you've got the senior pastor in trouble because he's going to go to the senior pastor and say, why did you listen to him and not use more discernment in what he had to say? And you allowed this to happen. And now all these other people had all this burden put on them because of a decision. Not that you made it, but you allowed somebody else to make that. It's like, and then what's he going to say? Say, the woman gave it to me.
Yeah. The woman. Yeah. It's that assistant pastor you gave me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know. But again, see that, what we're dealing with is a failure to understand context again, right? Not only do people take Bible verses out of context and say, oh, I found a verse somewhere in the Bible that seems to say the opposite of something else I found somewhere in the Bible. But then now, with at least the subject that we're talking about, they're taking principles out of the Bible and setting them against themselves. And unfortunately, with male leadership and all that, what people in the world will tend to do is they'll take the context of the world and where the culture is, feed that into the Bible and say, oh yeah, see, the Bible's not relevant. When in fact, the culture is dying and failing, and the people that live according to the Bible and its context and principle are doing just fine. I mean, look, we just passed 40 years of marriage, and I have friends that they're on the second marriage that aren't saved, and they're great people. I mean, I love them, but at the same time, they're they don't want to live according to the Bible. So, but the fruit is in their decisions. Now, they could criticize the Bible all they want, but the reality is that my life is much different than theirs, and there's a reason for that, and it's not just by accident. It's by design, and it takes effort and the willingness to obey God.
Yeah. The willingness to obey God. That's the thing. Are you going to bow down? Are you going to submit yourself to him and what he wants for you? I find, this sounds high and mighty, I know, but I find that easy to do because I have absolute faith that whatever he wants for me is the best for me. And even though it might not seem in the short term to be what I want or the best thing, I know that he has my best interest at heart. So along in our prayers every night, we include that, Lord, your will be done, but not mine, but yours. And I can say that honestly, even if I don't like what's going on at the time. And I found over the years that many times the things that he leads us into that I don't like or would want to avoid, they turn out to be real blessings. And that's what we have to submit ourselves to. And I don't think that people understand how much they are loved by him and how he desires only good things for him. And even that they read things in the Bible and his law, and they don't want that. They don't think that that's very conducive to their lifestyle. He's not trying to dictate over you or force his ways upon you. He's doing this, and his ways are for your good.
Well, think about it with parents, right? So parents tell the little kid, don't put your hand on the stove, it's hot. If the kid wants to put their hand on the stove, they burn their hand, right? It's the parent knows more than the child at that point. Kids trying to learn and grow and experience things and, exercise their own will and determination and things like that. So, some kids will say, okay, I trust you, Mom, that it's hot, I won't touch it. And other kids, they're going to look both ways, make sure nobody's looking and try it for themselves and then start screaming and crying because they burn their hand. And, people are like that with God. I mean, God says, don't touch the stove. It's hot. And, people say, well, who is he? Oh, so he just wants to control my life. Well, no, he doesn't want you to burn your hand. If I want to burn my hand, I'll burn my hand. And it's like, well, fine, then go burn your hand. Then they burn their hand. They go, well, how come God let that happen? And it's like, man, you just can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
People are tough to deal with, I'll tell you. They just, they want God to get rid of all the evil in the world, but they want to do evil. They want God to get rid of all the problems in the world, but if they're a problem, they want to stay. They want to be God themselves, and we've struggled with this problem since the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point you just brought up. They want God to get rid of all the evil in the world, and when he doesn't, they condemn him for it. But then in the Old Testament, when he goes to get rid of evil, then they complain and they say, "What? Oh, cruel! How?"
Yeah, God's immoral, and it's like, I thought you said God didn't exist. Well, if he did, he'd be immoral, and it's like, based on what values of morality? Yours?
Yeah.
Because if God doesn't exist, there's no standard. In other words, there's no source to ground morality other than my own arbitrary choices. And then you get almost 800 billion different moralities.
Yeah, well, there's probably that many out there. But, the truth is, as you well know, there's only one morality, and it only comes from one source. And we all know it. We all have it written on our hearts. Even without reading the Bible, we know what's right and wrong. The 2-year-old knows right from wrong to some degree. They know that, they're not supposed to go into that cookie jar, and yet they try to do it, and they know that they're guilty.
And what do they say when they get caught with cookies on their face? Did you do that? No.
Yeah. How'd it get there? I don't know.
Yeah. I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So, is there any other topics that you want to bring up?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. What do you think? Is there anything else that?
No, I mean, look, we've talked generally about science. We've talked about origins, apologetics. We've mentioned design. I mean, obviously, the design in living systems. We've talked about my favorite. We didn't get into specifically, but I love the kinesis, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really. And for those of you who don't know what the kinesis is, do a search online. I know on at the Discovery Institute, they have these little animated videos, and the kinesis is one of them, and they do a great job with it. But so, that's the workhorse of the cell, the kinesis. And so it's like this thing that moves these different loads from one area cell to the other. It's doing it in every cell in the body. But the amazing thing is that as it's walking and putting one foot, they call it feet, right? One foot over the other and walking, the highway that they're walking on, the tubular highway, is being made as they walk. How does it know where it's going? Like, how does the highway, which is not an intelligent being, know where this other piece of the cell, like, How does it all know that? See, God has to exist in order for that to continue to operate. Like that's why the whole deist God concept is not real. God didn't just kind of kick it off and go away. God is actively involved to maintain everybody's life. The reason that we breathe in after we breathe out is because God is allowing our life to remain in us. He can take it out at any moment, you know. And that's like you said in the last video, you know, it's certainly not murder. If God ends your life on earth, your life doesn't end in relation to God. So it's not like he's killing you and you're going away from him. He's taken your physical life on earth away, but you still continue to exist, whether in heaven or in hell. And so it's not like God can't murder people. He just like he gives the life. If he decides to take it, then that's his right. And they're just using the life that he has given them. Whether they use it the way that he wants them to or not is a whole different story. But there's no way that you can look at the kinesis, and this is like just one piece of a nano factory in people's cells that's operating all the time, doing stuff. How does it know what to do, Herb? That's the whole point. It's like, you know, you can talk about what it does epistemologically, but you have to ask the ontological question, well, why does it exist and how does it know it needs to do that in the first place? How does it know that? It's not a person. It's not an intelligent being.
All you need is some mud and millions of years, and it's inevitable.
Oh, you're killing me. I mean, it's just this is though it's immensely complex. This is the simple conceptual stuff that people don't just slow down and think about for a moment to say, that's just not possible without the existence of an eternal being beyond time, space, and matter, a necessary being to be there to cause, right, the original uncaused cause, to cause everything else that exists, because everything we understand, and why can we even understand it, okay? But everything that we understand, everything we can think about and know, we look at it in reference to cause and effect. We don't know about the origin of the universe in the sense that without being told. So we have to do from effect back to cause, like a detective. He walks in, he sees somebody has, 3 gunshots in the chest. He figures, well, he didn't kill himself, right? Would have killed himself on the first shot. Can't take the second 2. So he concludes what? Based on evidence, what he knows, effect to cause, has to be a homicide, right? So we do the same thing. We work back to God. Well, you work back to where the universe came from, and you know that time, space, and matter had to have a beginning. It's not eternal, right? Time, hello. And then it's like, well, then whoever made it can't be part of it, because you can't make yourself into existence. So it has to be this being beyond time, space, and matter. And, then we get into, he's got to obviously be intelligent, have a purpose, because everything's designed, nature's goal directed. You get into all the details scientifically, and you realize, of course, God is necessary. Of course, that shouldn't even be a question. And people, I think, that take, write the books, take all the times, go on the circuit, make all kinds of money saying God doesn't exist, are trying to pacify people in their sin and give them a reason, just like Dawkins did a number of years back in that bus tour he was on over in the UK, where on the side of the bus it says, God doesn't exist, so now you can enjoy yourself. Basically, go do whatever you want because God doesn't exist.
There you go to a life of misery right there,
Yep.
It's
Give them all the tools to destroy their own lives, and in the end, who's responsible for them? The person's responsible to God, and then, they listen to some quack that, just wanted to do it himself and wanted to have basically, a posse of people in agreement so that he didn't feel like he was, going to kind of die alone,
Yeah.
So anyways, we're coming up to 50 minutes, but anything else you want to share before we end?
No, I think that's good. I think we covered it.
Hit your points?
Yeah.
So you mean you had purpose and forethought and intelligence?
I don't know about that.
don't want to push too hard on that.
No. Let it go where it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen. Thank you everybody for hanging with us. I know that. Listen, if you can make it through almost 2 hours of our conversation, well, you have patience and endurance, and we commend you for that. But anyways, we encourage you to dig into the Bible. If you've never read the Bible, starting with the Gospel of John is a great place to start. Certainly if you have questions and you want any input from either Herb or I, you can send me an email at BibleMadeClear@gmail.com. If it's for Herb, I'll forward it to him. He can answer you himself. And if it's for me, I'll try to answer to the best of my ability and what I have. But other than that, we'd like to encourage you. Look, you can trust the Bible. You don't have to listen to the skeptics and the atheists about what they say. There is more information that reveals evidence for the Bible than you will possibly ever be able to fathom. The real decision is, out of all the evidence there, what do you actually take? Because there's too much. It'd be like trying to drink water from a fire hose. So we try to put it out in at least on the channel, we try to put it out in video series and segments and subject based and everything else. But anyways, we're here if you have questions. And until next time, may God richly bless you as you continue to study his word.